Welcome to The Sideshow.
All right, welcome to another edition of The Sideshow. We're going to be talking about some live material this week. And for this episode, Mark is going to be taking the lead. So, Mark, why don't you tell everybody what we're going to be talking about?
Sounds good, Mike. And yeah, it's fun to be kicking off Live Week. From time to time we say, hey, we're gonna take a little breather from the studio albums and pick some live material. Live albums tend to be compilations, kind of by nature, so they don't necessarily fall into the same kind of side routine, but you can tell that there's some thought put in, especially for a number of live albums, when they'll take the songs out of order from a concert because they want to put a good side together for the record listeners. So some really good sides of live albums out there as well, and we're going to be talking about a couple of them this week. Myself, I'm going to pick what wasn't really a concert for a band, but was actually a musical event. And the event that I'm talking about is the Concert for Bangla Desh that was really organized and run by George Harrison. This is back in the early 1970s, and it was really the first just massive benefit concert that was put on at any type of scale like this. Now, most of those listening will remember concerts such as Live Aid and Farm Aid and other types of benefit concerts that are a little bit more common today. They weren't as big a deal back when this occurred in 1971. So it was something new. Yes, there'd been great concerts. Woodstock was obviously a couple years before that. Plenty of great live events. But being a charity or benefit event was a newer deal, especially for a concert of this size, and really became an important event, and then a kind of an important live album as we entered the 70s.
Certainly in the rock and roll realm, this, as far as I'm aware, was really the first event of this kind. And to whatever extent there had been, other sort of benefits outside of rock and roll, I don't really know, but certainly this one was. And another aspect of the Concert for Bangla Desh that I think yet one can't ignore is this in some ways was really for George Harrison kind of the post-Beatles coming out party.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in between the breakup of the Beatles and this concert in August of 1971, George Harrison released the album All Things Must Pass, which was a triple album. 3 vinyl discs, 6 sides of music. So, the opening track of the side that we're going to be talking about today is sort of his first commentary on that whole state of affairs, and being able to cough up a triple album of songs shows that over time in the Beatles, and it's not particularly controversial to point out that he was overshadowed on a number of levels, not necessarily musical talent, but just he was overshadowed by the John Lennon and Paul McCartney team and or by the individual songs when they started to write songs separately from each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so he managed to get songs onto the albums going back as early as like Rubber Soul.
Mm-hmm.
But he just was kind of squelched in his musical inspiration and ambition and aspiration, and so this sort of allowed him to come out and really plant his flag And certainly the side of music that we're going to talk about today, I think, illustrates that he was ready.
Yeah,
He was ready, and he met that challenge.
yeah. I mean, it's interesting. You point out, the size of his first album. And when you're able to very rapidly come out with 30 songs, right, for kind of implies you've been writing songs for a while that maybe haven't been delivered on, through the Beatles, who he worked for. And I think they'd fallen into a mode where he got, maybe a track per side by the last albums. There was some obviously great tunes that were there, but he had a pretty big backlog of material to get started with, as he had a pretty good collection of friends in the music industry. Who helped him on his first album, and a lot of the same artists that helped him on that first album were here for this concert as well. And folks like Billy Preston, Eric Clapton, Leon Russell, Ringo Starr, and the band Badfinger, who he was working with pretty closely at the time. These were all people that participated on his first album and also showed up for the concert at Bangla Desh in New York. So a little bit of that connection that he'd had, obviously being a member of the Beatles, pretty big resume booster there. Regardless of whether he was seen as one of the lead people or lead songwriters or not. So he comes out with this album, All Things Must Pass, and he's got these connections in the music industry. He, from the time that he'd been with the Beatles, he'd been very interested and incorporated in Eastern music. And, that had continued, and he was, working with Ravi Shankar, a sitar player from the East, and so that was a connection that he'd had. And from that relationship, he was really learning about some of the just horrible things that were happening in Bangladesh. And because of this communication and the connection that he'd had to the region, he started to become concerned about the refugee crisis that was going on there. There were two kind of just back-to-back blows that the people in this region received. I think I know a lot about history or whatever. Some of this is unclear where all this comes from when it comes to the area of Bangladesh. We think a lot about the separation between India and Pakistan. After India separated from England, there was some strife between the religions. So basically the Muslims go to Pakistan and the Hindus stay in India. What I did not really realize is that Pakistan initially was actually two regions, one on the west of India and one on the east. West Pakistan and East Pakistan, two provinces of Pakistan. But they were separated. India was in between them. So we've got all kinds of issues that start erupting from that right away. And there was a freedom or liberation movement within East Pakistan to become independent. And that created a pretty brutal war of liberation and ultimately a genocide of the folks in that region. So very difficult 9 months of war in this separation of East Pakistan from Pakistan to ultimately become Bangladesh, that nation. And at the same time that this horrible situation and refugee crisis due to the war was happening, they were hit by a very significant and powerful cyclone. So what this did with a bunch of people who were already in refugee status was created a just real disaster of, at the humanity level of what was going on there. Hundreds of thousands of people potentially killed during this time period, and just a very difficult time period for the folks in this region. This, through the connections that George Harrison had in the area, really drew his attention, and he decided that he was going to do this this benefit concert, which he began to organize, and he explains it later as what became 3 months worth of nonstop phone calls, trying to get this thing organized, trying to get this thing set up, and an effort that finally culminated in 2 concerts on the same day, August 1st, 1971, to take place in Madison Square Garden in New York. They originally were going to have 1 show. It sold out very quickly. They opened up an afternoon show. So these 2 shows became the concert for Bangladesh. And we're going to be talking about part of the music from that show today.
Well, and I think that I don't know precisely when George Harrison met or started to, associate musically with Ravi Shankar. But certainly he played, sitar was played, I believe, for the first time on a Beatles album on Rubber Soul, Norwegian Wood.
Yeah.
So this is before, before they met the Maharishi and stuff like that. And so he had taken an interest in the music. And I believe there was also a track on Revolver that was very Eastern. We have Within You, Without You on Sgt. Pepper.
Yeah.
Perhaps a little bit more well known. But so he had taken an interest in Eastern music, I think, independently of specifically what might have been going on in India. But many people are familiar with the story of the Beatles as a band going to India, with the Maharishi, and staying there at his retreat, kind of in northern India, up near the Rishikesh, I believe is the name of the community, up closer to the Himalayas. And I believe that George Harrison ended up staying in India longer than any of the other members of the Beatles. And so in addition to whatever interest he had developed up to that point for Eastern music, I mean, he became much more immersed, I think, than any of the other members of the Beatles in Eastern spiritual things, and some of the music that we're going to hear, and certainly some of the music that he put out, displayed that. And I can recall from geography textbooks when like we were in junior high and stuff like that. I can still remember maps, with East Pakistan on there, and the political intricacies of what led to that conflict, and then was complicated by this hurricane, that came through the Bay of Bengal. Any way you slice it, and I think there's not necessarily, there's some controversy as to the precise number of people that were killed as part of all of these problems. But I don't think there's any dispute over the fact that it's in the hundreds of thousands of people that were killed. So I mean, it was by any standard at that time, or if something similar in terms of loss of life were to happen today, it was a major humanitarian crisis. And George, not inconsistent with some of the religious things that he was immersing himself in, decided he was going to do something about it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And back to your point about the India trip, it's very clear that members such as John and Paul of the Beatles came back from that trip thinking they had been sold a bill of goods from the Maharishi, and really, if any, although they'd gone in an attempt to achieve a broader spiritual awakening and this type of thing, they came home kind of convinced that didn't exist. As you mentioned, I mean, George hung around for a while, right? And it's very clear that he returned with a more deepened sense of spirituality from that trip, or at least reaffirmed the spirituality that he'd had to that point. And a lot of that carried through in his music. We're going to be listening to a couple of his songs today, all influenced by this, especially two of the three tracks that we're going to hear. And he had no trouble incorporating this type of spiritual and religious message into his music, and quite frankly was one of the few pop rock stars that was really able to do it effectively and have songs that were very spiritual and religious based, yet had incredible popular appeal as well. And I think that's, we kind of get back to this on why he held this concert in the first place. I think that these were just deep, genuine beliefs that he had, and he was just writing and singing about what he felt, which you sometimes don't get the feel of that same level of genuine, feeling and spirituality when you're listening to other musicians. And we'll just leave that there. But he did decide he was going to walk the walk with this particular concert.
His spirituality was not judgmental. And later in the 70s, towards the end of the 70s, when Bob Dylan went through his born again Christian phase, some of Bob's material was a little more pointed.
Yeah.
Lyrically and sort of wagging a finger almost at his listeners.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the vibe that George was putting out. It was a more, at least as I hear it, and have heard it over the time that I've been listening to this music. It was open and positive and sort of a, you can go your own way, but, here is one path that I'm sort of trying to illuminate for people. So it was a good-natured sort of thing. It was trying to expand, and draw everybody in rather than draw lines and separate tribes out and whatnot.
I'd agree. A much more acceptable way of communicating these things, to say, look, this is a good option, right? Which is what he was saying, as opposed to you all out there are choosing a bad option. And he certainly was the first, where he was just saying, hey, this is something that works for me and is good for me. And then layer one more thing on top of it, is you have the ability to really write and produce some beautiful songs, some good music that can, if you can back it up with that, you've got something that will work. And it did for him, with it, not only his albums but his success with this concert, which was not a given. Again, this was the first time that something at this scale had really been worked, and there was a number of complexities of doing something like this. We see a similar thing. We just got over the Winter Olympics, and one of the things that people like on the hockey team will talk about is we bring all these fantastic people together, but we haven't played as a team before. And, just trying in a couple of weeks to come together as a team is incredibly difficult, even if each and every single individual member are of the highest caliber. Well, you experience something like this in a superstar type concert that was put together. It was really only over a period of about 6 weeks from when they generally said, we want to do this, until the concert actually occurred. And a lot of these artists were on their own tours that they were doing. They had to stop the tour. They agreed to participate in the concert, but they had to stop the tours and then go to New York, right, in order to make this happen. George Harrison himself, he was working in L.A. With Ravi Shankar on a project that they were working on. He was working with the band Badfinger, producing one of their albums in London. So he's flying back and forth to deal with those, and then he's trying to get this concert organized, which is occurring in New York City at the same time. Well, each of these other bands had their own similar type of issues that they were dealing with. And because of that, it was hard to get commitments up front for people that said, in fact, it wasn't until, when you take a look at people like Eric Clapton and Bob Dylan who showed up, it wasn't a certainty that they were even going to be there until the day before or even the day of the concert. So, that in itself made things difficult. You also had these bands that, because there wasn't a whole lot of or any rehearsal time that was given for this project, a couple, Harrison and a couple of other people started to get things set up and record and that type of thing to kind of get things ready for the concert, not even a full week ahead of time, and other artists were slowly arriving, and they didn't actually have what would be considered even a full run through of the concert until like the day before. And frankly, there was a lot of concern that this thing was going to be a great big flop. Not commercially, because they'd sold the tickets, right, to get there, but they'd really intended to put out a record, a film after this, and if it was a flop, that just wasn't going to work. Because one of the things that Harrison had committed to all these artists was, look, if this sucks, you don't have to be on the album, and you don't have to be on the follow-up film. And it another thing to consider, not only Harrison, but the same thing held true for Bob Dylan. Neither one of these two had performed in front of a live concert audience for years before this. George Harrison hadn't done a concert, like a stadium type concert, since 1966. The Beatles had stopped their touring. Just they wanted to, for all the reasons that, following the Beatles and that type of thing, that for family reasons and to focus on studio albums, that type of thing, they hadn't done concerts. And Bob Dylan had not performed live in a while at this particular time. I mean, they were worried, can we even do this again? And it has been said by some of the people that were there was after the first show in the afternoon, they actually realized this might work. Right? They'd actually gotten through a show and they were like, they clapped, they liked us. This was a good show. They did some rearrangements on switched a couple things around as far as order of the songs, and then went into the evening show and gave what I think that everybody there was happy with the performance. The first portion of the show, the concert, was devoted to Eastern music. So Ravi Shankar took the kind of the lead, and then other Eastern music kind of highlighted that. And then the second half of the show was Western music, and the people in the audience didn't even know who else was going to be there besides George Harrison, because it was billed as George Harrison and friends. And the actual presence of Eric Clapton and a number of songs from Bob Dylan were huge hits. And generally goes down is that especially the evening performance was a really good fucking concert, right? For those that were there.
It's certainly well known that the Beatles performed their last public concert at Candlestick Park near San Francisco in 1966. And Bob Dylan, who had toured, in 1964, 65, 1966, he was big, he was big at all those times. And then, he suffered a motorcycle crash in 1966, which kind of took him out for a while. And he did perform in 1969 at the Isle of Wight Festival in England with, I believe, with the band, the American band, the band backing him up. But that was his only, concert of any substance that he had performed since 1966 as well. And so, with that little caveat, you're exactly right. The two biggest names, hadn't really played a concert like that. That's an important aspect of this whole thing. And I tend to agree that and because I believe it's the evening show, which was recorded and put out as the live album. Do I put this on all the time and listen to it? Well, no. but it was well done. The songs came off well. They didn't lay an egg.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't messy. It wasn't as tight as you know, a touring band that's been on the road and playing concerts, you know, multiple times per week for the last 4 months.
Yeah.
Wasn't like that. But it was good. It was good quality music, and there was enough professionalism amongst the musicians that, you know, the show must go on, and it did.
Yeah.
And they really pulled it off. It was a successful, and I think it was regarded at the time as a successful endeavor.
Well, absolutely. A few other complexities as well. You know, a lot of the phone calls that, and we'll find this impacted the project farther on down the line, was to get the rights for the presence of all these musicians, and ultimately the rights and the presence for the songs on the album and the film. So we're dealing with the music industry. They had made a few mistakes on setting up the business organization that actually ran this. So they didn't set it up as a charitable organization properly, because all these funds were supposed to go to UNICEF to distribute. That caused tax problems farther on down the line. So, you know, a lot of things. And then little issues like Eric Clapton was in the middle of a 2-year heroin binge when this whole thing was going on. So when he arrived, he was in extreme heroin withdrawal. They were kind of snack feeding him methadone through a lot of the day. Excuse me, to kind of keep him in touch with what was happening. So, you know, the music business can be difficult, right? To make things happen. But to your point, not only was it musically considered a good event and a great concert, it was successful too. The gate for the tickets for the show, which they were able to collect and immediately distribute to UNICEF, was $250,000. Then, through the release of the box set and the Ultimate Movie, there was kind of an immediate $12 million that came in. That's the money that got hung up through taxes and that type of stuff. And it actually took close to 10 years for all that money to finally get distributed to UNICEF. But subsequently, I mean, all the funds for all the profits for these have continued to go to UNICEF, and for that, it has been estimated that about $45 million were ultimately raised and distributed to UNICEF since 1971 when this occurred. So when you look back at that, I mean, a pretty impressive effort for that was put together in 5 or 6 weeks to make this happen. And the result was the concert of Bangladesh, which came with some pretty interesting music.
Yeah. Well, the power of music can certainly be employed for good purposes.
Absolutely. So, hey, let's take a look at this album and then talk about some of the songs and the music. It was literally a box set that they released. It's in this cardboard box. Some of you may have seen this. It almost looks like something from the 40s and 50s record collections that we see out there a lot. But this was the cover. Obviously, kind of a heart-gripping picture of a child on the cover, and then inside there was three records that were contained inside, and we're going to be focusing on side 2 of this. The first side was some of the Eastern music that we spoke to. Bob Dylan's performance got a side of this. I mean, it's kind of spread out between the different artists, but we're going to be focusing today on side 2 of the concert for Bangladesh. Anything else on background on George Harrison and the concert, Mike, before we dig into these tracks?
Well, other than that, George Harrison was a guitarist. but he was, and I think he was an excellent guitarist. And when you really pick apart some of the Beatles albums, particularly the later Beatles albums, there's a lot of good guitar on there. And both John and Paul also played guitar in the Beatles albums, but George Harrison was a good guitar player. But he wasn't a flashy guitar player. He wasn't like Eric Clapton. And I think that it speaks to his character, both musically and otherwise, that he sort of understood his place musically in that regard, and so it was important to him. Like for when the Beatles recorded "While My Guitar Gently Weeps," wanted to bring in someone that had a little more something for purpose of that song, and then here, he wanted to have some support in the guitar realm, and so I think he understood himself as a musician probably better than people gave him credit.
Yeah, I would agree. And he also, he'd been involved with a very successful song and hit creating machine for about a decade before he came to here. Now, he obviously had some different influences, some different ideas about the types of songs that he may like to do, and ultimately was, a little dissatisfied with the way that decisions were getting made, especially towards the very end, when I think that he had demonstrated that he could write songs. He could, he was a player in the Beatles, which again is pretty big company. So, we talked early on in the show here, when he did get a chance to go out on his own, he had a lot of material stacked up. And a lot of the people that performed at this concert, right? Leon Russell and Ringo and Eric Clapton and Billy Preston and, the members of the band, they were all in the studio with him on putting this album together, All Things Must Pass, that created the material that came, the songs that we're going to hear from today all came from that album. So I'd agree with you. He knew where his skills were. He knew how good songs were made. And he knew sometimes you need an extra something to come in to bring that life to the song, and he certainly wasn't afraid to do that. And he had the friends in the music business to make that happen. So, all right. This side, 4 songs on this side. Let me just quickly the structure of the side, and then we'll get into it. The first 3 songs are from George Harrison. So as they transition from the eastern portion of the concert, and then now they're in the western portion of the show, George Harrison opens it up, and the first 3 songs that we're going to hear are George Harrison tunes. This larger star-filled band is behind him, right? That's doing this, and so there's a lot of sound, right? That is going. This is kind of in fact, Phil Spector was involved in the thing here. This wall of sound that he liked to produce was absolutely a part of this. And you'll hear in all this music that you can hear that there's a lot of people up on the stage putting this music together. The sound is big. The sound is full, right, of what's happening. So we have 3 George Harrison songs, and then the final song is by Billy Preston, right? One of his tunes. So track 1, first song on the side. So this is the first song that kicked off the western section of the concert, is called Wah Wah. And I tell you, let's just play some of this, and then we'll talk about it. But try to think of this as something that was going through George's mind as some of the difficulties with the Beatles in their final days of recording were popping up. So let's listen to that, and then we will talk through it on the other side.
Sounds good.
Now, for anybody that has seen the Get Back documentary about the Beatles working on their final album, there's a part of that where George quits the band. And it is said that when he went home after leaving those sessions, that he wrote this song. And whether he wrote it all down or kind of had the idea for it, the bottom line, wah wah, comes with a couple different meanings. In subsequent interviews, he was saying it actually referred to two things. A wah wah was a headache, but it was also the wah wah pedal that was on the ground that he was very fond of using with his guitar work. And when you listen to the words of the song, it clearly also means wah wah is just the talk of some people around you. So
pissing and moaning.
Yes, pissing and moaning and telling you what to do and these types of things. The being in the studio, all the talking, the bickering, these types of things or disagreements that were going on. It left George with a headache, and to the point where it was something that had brought him to a place that he wanted to be, an accomplished musician in a very successful, the most successful band, certainly at the time. So you can hear in what he's singing here the thanks for that, but at the same time, this wah wah was everywhere, and he knew that that life could be good, yet it certainly wasn't good with this wah wah around. Now, as we said, George was a product of the Beatles' music machine, so sometimes words like this, are how that a song is put together, and with the idea that maybe eventually I'll replace these fake words like wah wah with something more meaningful. But you know what? Sometimes you don't, right? Yeah. And you just leave them the way that they were. So clearly, in his mind, as he was writing this song, he referred to all of this kind of negativity and how the studio had become to feel as wah wah. And this song was just kind of venting some of those frustrations. So although it's about a difficult time for him, the song has a very upbeat and energetic feel. And from the perspective of music, I think is a great way to start this Western portion of the concert.
Well, because even though the song, the lyrics of the song in particular, arise from this sort of angst and lack of satisfaction that had been in place for however long before the Beatles broke up on George's part. It's an upbeat song. It's more a feeling of liberation than bitterness.
Yeah.
And it's not a vicious attack.
Yeah.
On any of the individual members of the Beatles. I mean, there was some sniping between John and Paul via songs that they recorded after the Beatles broke up. I mean, John Lennon on How Do You Sleep?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and that was directed specifically at Paul McCartney and blah blah blah. It's just the feel of the song, the tone of the song is as I say, or as the word I think is the most appropriate. It's a sense of liberation.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't need your headaches. I'm going to do my thing, and that's okay.
Yeah.
So it was a wonderful way to open what basically for him is like, okay, this is really the first time that George Harrison, as standing alone as an individual musician and artist, is before the world, with a spotlight on him.
Yeah.
leading George Harrison and Friends, pretty solid opener. I mean, and I understand why, okay, at the beginning of the album with Rob, they had like a 16-minute track of Ravi Shankar playing some sitar music and whatnot, and that stuff gets pretty heady.
A little tough to hang with if you're not in the mood.
But this, okay, well, we got that. Want to keep in mind why we're here, and let's sort of, acknowledge the music and the culture and the spiritual aspects of the place that we're trying to help with this endeavor that we're doing. But okay, now that we've got the table set, let's play some rock and roll.
Yeah.
It's a good opener just generally, and certainly a good opener for George.
Yeah, and to your point, it was a true opener. And when you think about the pressure that he must have felt as that spotlight went on and they had to dive into that song, it's like, this is it. This is my first, in front of a crowd performance post Beatle. I need to get this one right. You can almost feel the pressure. You can also feel in the song the size of the music, the number of musicians that were on the stage. You hear it, and they get out right away with all of the the backup singers as well, right? With that wah wah, you've got all the musicians, you've got all the vocalists coming right at you from the beginning. And again, you can just sense from the very first count that this is a big show, right? There's a lot of musicians up there. There's a lot going on. There's this wall of sound that is coming at you, and it again, you get your foot tapping to get this show started.
No.
So
good, good opener.
Good opener. Then we move to what is everybody has heard the next song. It's a song called "My Sweet Lord." It was one of the big hits from All Things Must Pass. Continues to be a very well known and frequently played song, and another example of a deeply spiritual or religious song that achieved a lot of very popular success, which as we talked about, George Harrison was able to do. So let's listen to the start of this. I like on live albums when you hear a song that the crowd really immediately responds to. There's just something that with that crowd response that just brings something more to the performance. So we'll start this from the very beginning and listen to some of this, a song which, again, most of our listeners will have heard, but this was a version from this particular concert.
Sounds good.
Hare Krishna. My sweet Lord, my Lord, my sweet Lord, I really want to see you, really want to be with you, really want to see you, Lord, but it takes so long, my Lord, my Lord. My sweet Lord, my sweet Lord.
My Sweet Lord, by George Harrison. This is a bigger version than what you would hear on his, on the studio album. The live feeling, the live environment. It was just a bigger type of play. A little bit more pared down on some of his other recordings because, well, it's a soft it's a soft song. Now, the intention of George Harrison on this was trying to merge together some of the chantings and feelings and what you might hear as poetry and lyrics from this Hare Krishna religion that he was close to and understood, as well as Christianity and even Judaism. Can we take these chants and these feelings and as the story goes, as he was originally contemplating this song, he was going back and forth between saying to himself Hare Krishna and Hallelujah. And again, these are terms from two different, but as you'd go back and forth, this notion of chanting of the name or the celebration of your Lord brings a feeling of well-being to you, seemed to work for all these different religions. So can we blend these together? I think that there's clearly a kind of a strength given to some of the Hare Krishna, sayings as we go through the entire song, but they are wrapped together. And I think it's a message of look, we're all worshiping the same Lord here. So maybe we can get past some of the differences and focus on some of the similarities. And ultimately, this is about feeling a level of peace for ourselves in being near or understanding or close to your Lord, and it brings the same sense of well-being, regardless on where in the world you are or what church you happen to be attending.
My understanding is that in the most general sense that George Harrison's views about a religion or spirituality, about God, are that the primary relationship is between the individual and God, and the sort of the various some religions in the world, there's sort of a hierarchy or a bureaucracy that sort of is kind of taken charge and whatnot, and I think the way that you phrased it, I think, is the best way to really summarize where he was coming from regarding spirituality and religion, was that we're all worshiping the same God. We're all praying to we all seek peace, from the same higher power, and that I think, and that is maybe what spirituality and religion stood for George Harrison, was the striving for inner peace, and he said that there's many ways to do it, but we can all agree that it's a good thing, and those who seek to do so should be encouraged and not dissuaded from that sort of spiritual quest.
Absolutely. And I think that there's a big focus, especially in this song, and we're going to listen to one more part from towards the end of this song in just a second that I think illustrates this, but not just in, religious spiritual pursuits, but you're also seeing this in efforts around, say, mindfulness that may not be religiously based, but are more, inner peace relates. The notion of chanting, right? The notion of chanting, of saying the name of your Lord, or if you're looking at something like yoga or mindfulness that may not be about worship, but might be about, internal peace and self-care, different types of tones or expressions that are good for the soul. Not just honoring the leader, whether it be God or some other type of head or focus of religion, but just this idea that chanting or saying certain verses, words, or sounds is helpful. Again, in that idea of, look, this is just something how you might be able to feel a little bit more peace. And there is quite a bit of chanting that goes along with the lyrics as we get towards the end of this song. So I want to play just a little bit of that section, and you're going to hear as they, he talks about, my sweet Lord, and I really want to see you. I really want to be with you. You're going to hear in the background, right, this kind of chanting of, whether it be Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, which is a sequence of chants that is used in that religion. You're going to hear Hallelujah, which is a very common theme of Christian and Jewish religions. You'll hear that going on in the background of the song, and then we'll come back and wrap up our conversation about this song.
All right.
So we did a little floating back and forth there between the lyrics and these chants, and bringing together these and mixing in these different chants from different religions was just an example. And the song continued to flow along very beautifully. So, there's something to be said for the piece that this gives, just of song, but of particular types of phrases or words that those that aren't inclined to be singing lengthy, ballads and hymns and that type of thing can just either say to themselves or to those around them and experience the peace. Clearly a big belief of George Harrison's.
The the significance of chanting, and chanting is different than singing. But I mean, just the sort of the vocal, the community people singing together, people speaking together, people chanting together. There has it has an effect on people that is good.
Yeah.
That's why are hymns sung in church? Why do certain religions chant? It's to kind of invoke something, to invoke a feeling or a state of mind, or what have you. Like opera music. Mozart's Requiem. The words aren't in English.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether they're Latin, Italian, German. I don't know.
It's some bullshit. Yeah.
But the point is that, like U2, Bono, lot of like la la la's and sha-la-las and all. I can remember when we saw U2 in Madison in 1992. For when they played Pride.
Yeah.
From Unforgettable Fire. That oh.
Yeah.
The whole frickin' stadium was singing along.
Yeah. Yeah.
They weren't words.
Yeah.
But there was it brought everybody together in a mutuality of sentiment, feeling, emotion, that was uplifting.
Yeah.
And it was, and so there is an aspect of humanity that responds to that activity. It brings people together. It transcends language. And George was trying to say something along the lines of what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I'd 100% agree. I think that it enhances a shared experience, right? So, for example, at the U2 concert at Camp Randall that we were at together, I mean, everybody in that stadium was having a shared experience up to that point, right? We we'd experienced the opening act, which I think was Rum DMC, and then U2. We're experiencing this together. That's Public Enemy. Sorry,
Enemy.
but I there we go.
Not the most spiritual music of the day.
No, but still a shared experience
Yes.
for everybody in the everybody thing. But you take that, so you're already have this shared experience. You've all gathered here for the same reason. You're all focusing on the same thing. But something about adding that when we're all responding verbally with the same thing, there's something that just takes it to 11. Right, when when you're able to do that. So there's clearly an additive power above and beyond just having a shared experience. And you're right, it's experienced in churches, it's experienced in concerts, it's experienced in the military when people are singing cadence while they're marching. Again, it gets you to forget about pain and these types of things that you may be experiencing while you're going through that. And it was a part of this song, which at the end of the day is just a beautiful, very well regarded song from George Harrison's very early work, and again still gets quite a bit of airplay to this day.
And the fact that he apparently copped the musical arrangement from the Chiffons doesn't really detract from it as a good song, in my humble opinion.
What you gonna do, right?
Yeah.
And that's another interesting aspect about when people are just a complete sidebar, not necessarily to do with this, but that is interesting how you have such a spiritual and highly religious song, and the idea of portion of it might have been lifted from a different band. I mean, that just it tells you a little bit about the inspirational process, that sometimes it's hard to get out of your head things that you've heard from other bands, and we point that out from time to time on this show as well. So. My Sweet Lord, a very, a big song of George Harrison's, a little bit of a kind of slowed things down from what was a much more driving opener. And now we're going to continue on to the third track. And this is another very spiritual, very religious type song, much more upbeat though. Then we switch back to this kind of more of a driving type song, and it is called "Waiting on You All." And let's hear how this gets started and ramps up, and we'll talk a little bit about the tune afterwards.
All right.
You don't need loving. You don't need no bedtime. You don't need no horoscope or a microscope to see the mess that you're in. You open up your heart. You know what I mean? We've been polluted so long. Now here's a way for you to get clean. By chanting the names of the Lord and you'll be free. The Lord is waiting on your arms to wait and see. Chanting the names of the Lord and you'll be free. The Lord is waiting on your arms to wait and see.
So I hear in this, it's first of all, the ultimate message is, with all these things that go on in life, the only thing that you need is the Lord as the one. And all these different things that you think you need, that you think you don't need, or whatever, in the end, the most important thing is the Lord, who is waiting on us all. At wherever that point may be and wherever people's belief may be. And in order to give that message, I mean, this is a very upbeat, type of arrangement, a lot of music, a lot of sound, very bouncy almost in that dun 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 dun. Almost has this kind of pop song feel to it. Yet again, clearly with a message that George was very focused on during this time of the importance of chanting the names of the Lord so that we can be free, which is how the song actually ends.
Lyrically, this song is a little more pointed than My Sweet Lord, because it's sort of like it's more advice as opposed to just articulation of his own. He's suggesting to the people, this is what you should do. Although I think it's still more of here's something that you should do as opposed to something you must do, or this or that. It's that relative lack of judgment in the lyrics. I think that still applies here. But it definitely it's rock and roll music. And it does maintain that upbeat, more positive vibe, and doesn't stray away from the fact that the ultimate goal is inner peace.
Yeah.
In my opinion, or at least I don't hear anything contrary to that in the song. I don't.
Yeah, I would agree with you 100%. Another example of the way that he has of if you sit and just read the lyrics, you can see very clearly this type of messaging that is a part of the song. But if you just listen to the song, as many people do, especially if you're watching some live music, or you're out at a bar or at a party or whatever it might be, where you're not focused on the lyrics at all. When you hear music and do we want to dance to this, or what do we want to do? I mean, this song is just it's a fun move along type song that has got the type of feel that would get people dancing at a party, or in a bar, in a live performance, or that type of thing. And the message that comes along with it, that comes along with George Harrison, right? And the music that he's the types of things that he wants to get to. So this from again, a very kind of upbeat start. My Sweet Lord, which is a much softer but a very well-known song, and now we're back to kind of getting the blood flowing again. It keeps us moving through this particular side and heads us towards the last track. Track number 4, final track on this side, is we switch over now, and you can hear George Harrison introduce a member of the band, he says, which is Billy Preston. And Billy Preston takes center stage to perform his hit song at the time, which is a song called That's the Way God Planned It. And we'll hear some of that in just a second. But, it is important to note that, Billy Preston was, involved with the Beatles, especially towards the end. He actually received a credit on their final album, which was rare for the Beatles, who did work with other musicians while they were putting their songs together. But he was, a pretty big and important part of the Let It Be album, and as I said, actually received a credit on the album. And from that, he immediately got a record contract with the Beatles label, Apple. And put out an album this song, That's the Way God Planned It. Now, I actually first really paid attention to this song taking my kids to a movie called Joyful Noise. This is a movie about 10 years ago. Dolly Parton was in it. Queen Latifah was in it. Whatever, a musical thing, just the type of family thing that we took the kids to. And this is like church choirs that are battling each other, right? Are going. Well, anyway, the big bad team that the protagonists team was going up against, they actually sang this song as a part of that. Now, this was kids singing it, so it's much more of a kind of a youthful type way. But even from that, I'd heard this song previously from listening to the album, but I hadn't like really paid a lot of attention to it. This wasn't in my playlist rotations or heavy rotations, but I knew of the song. And as we were watching this movie, I started, tapping my hand on my knee or whatever, because this was a song that I knew that this church choir was singing, and it kind of brought it back up in my mind. So I bopped back and did a little listening to Billy Preston in performing this particular song. So it's had some relevance and redos and covers in subsequent years as well, even though I don't think that a lot of people really think about this song that much when they think about Billy Preston. So let's hear a little bit of That's the Way God Planned It, and then we'll talk further about the song on the other side.
All right.
Why can't we be humble like the good Lord said? He promised to exalt us, but low is the way. How men be so greedy when there's so much left. All things are God given, and they all have been blessed. That's the way God planned it. That's the way God wants it to be. That's the way God planned it. That's the way God wants it to be.
Now, this is not, as we hear, this isn't a kids choir, which again was the version of this song that kind of brought this back into my memory. This is, you may or may not recognize Billy Preston's voice in his playing, but it is again a big performance from the band that is here. This song is a lifting song. It speaks about God's will, what God wants, another spiritual, related song. But again, I would say it is more uplifting than preachy in its feel, certainly with the way that it was presented here in this particular concert. And also a very upbeat and full rendition of this particular song that we hear to wrap up this side of the album of this concert.
Well, there's a very gospel flavor to this song, more so than the last two songs of George's, which were
I'd agree.
very, very spiritual, religious, innate, in terms of the gist of where he was coming from with those songs. But this sounds much more like conventional gospel music.
Yes.
And the lyrical sentiments are consistent with the sort of open-minded, benevolent, sort of charitable sort of faith and religion than the fire and brimstone sort of thing. And Billy Preston, there's a reason why he merited a credit on the Let It Be stuff. I mean, you can, and they laid it out fairly well in that Get Back video. And because the band, it was like an engine that had run out of oil.
Yeah.
And so they're working on the song Get Back, and they introduce Billy Preston, and he sort of puts this electric piano. It wasn't the same kind of organ sound like you hear in this track.
Yeah.
But I can remember watching that Get Back video and thinking, this keyboard just lubricates the other instruments and makes the music flow so much better. I mean, when when the keyboard solo in the final version of Get Back that made it onto the album. I mean, when Billy Preston was playing that solo, he was, as you and I sometimes say, he was holding the pliers.
Yes. Yeah.
At that moment. I mean, that was just because what he had to offer the Beatles was just what they needed to make that work.
Yeah.
And whatnot. And fun fact about Billy Preston is he is, if I recall correctly, either the or one of the only popular artists who had both a vocal and an instrumental #1 hit.
Oh, really?
And those were, I believe those were Will It Go Round in Circles was the vocal, and Out of Space, which is like a keyboard, almost kind of disco funky instrumental track.
Well, another fun fact, Will It Go Round in Circles is my favorite song to karaoke to. So we'll have to get some footage of that in here on the show sometime. So and again, another very fun upbeat song there. But this song, I would agree with you. This is a gospel number that they put in. It's got that feel with the organ. It's got the feel with the vocal harmonies that go along with it. And there's an uplifting feel to Preston's vocals. It's a nice song to listen to, and there's hope in them words there, right? That is coming on. So it's a good conclusion to this particular side, which had George Harrison's kind of coming out party from the Beatles here with two very upbeat songs and a quieter song in between. And this is just to conclude it up with an uplifting gospel tune. Again, leaves you with a smile on your face as you get done with this side.
Yeah. It really was a good way to end it. It takes a little bit of the focus off of George and starts to move on with the rest, because there's a lot of these other musicians that sort of make so get to take the mic and kind of do their thing. I mean, the first song on side 3, Ringo does, It Don't Come Easy, I believe, one of his songs. And so it's I think George maybe not there were better songs later on the album, on the subsequent sides. There's Here Comes the Sun and Something. I mean, probably his 2 strongest tracks from his Beatles years. But this is maybe just the best slice. This side is the best slice of here's the new George.
Yeah.
You really get a good taste of where he was at, come his new career after the Beatles. And so it was in addition to just well rendered live renditions of these songs, it's just a good piece of music from a very important individual artist from the classic rock era.
I would agree, and that working especially with all these other artists to put out what was a very interesting album. And you pointed out there's a lot of material on the other sides of this that are well worth a listen. Now, if you're a George Harrison fan, you're probably going to have some of his other very important albums that you're going to have in more regular rotation, and that might not include this. But sitting down and listening to this album through, what is basically what would have been these concerts that occurred at the time is time well spent, because it is good music. And I propose that side 1, which is the Eastern music, to give that a listen to as well. I mean, George Harrison was a very important person in music. Not only through his work with the Beatles, but his solo work as well. The guy was exposed to a lot of music and found this, Eastern style music, sitar-based music, to be very good and very important. And if George Harrison thought it was pretty good, it to me is worth a listen. So not only this side, but the entire rest, the other 5 sides as well of this album are certainly worth a listen, and we'd encourage folks to do that. But this side, I'd agree with you. It was the kind of the opening of the concert. It was really the foot that George Harrison decided he wanted to put forward when he first took these steps. So that's why I like this particular side. But either way, an important artist, George Harrison, an important group of friends that made up this concert, including the likes of Eric Clapton and Bob Dylan, who were incredible stars in their own right, and a cast of other friends that were significant musicians as well, and created an interesting, and I'd say historic event, because it was the first in what would become a number of very important benefit type concerts, and they all learned a lot from what George Harrison did here, like how to set things up to avoid tax problems and these types of things. I mean, he really blazed a trail that people like Bob Geldof and these types of things really listen to. So an important album as well. So great side to a very important album, and a great conversation, Mike.
Definitely. All right, Mark. We will talk to you next time.